Hello, my friends, and welcome. Today I have for you an Irish tale about poets and poetry that is by turns disgusting, violent, and redeeming. And I tell it for you, my creative friends, because I think ultimately it's encouraging, especially once we've had a little time to talk it over. So again, thank you for being here. My name is Kate. Like you, I'm a creator, multi-passionate creator, a lot of irons in the fire. And I'm also a professor of Irish language and poetry. And I like to bring these together because I think together they help us live creative lives that are joyful and productive and just exciting. So that's what we're all about. Well, let me tell you just a little bit about this tale. It's actually found in a 12th century manuscript called the Book of Leinster, and the language indicates it might be a bit older than the 12th century, and it features two poets who are very famous and well known. So I'll tell you the tale. Once long ago in Ireland, there was a blacksmith called Ecet Salach. That means dirty Ecet, and of course that makes sense because a blacksmith is dirty all the day. Well, Ecet had a son, and his son was considered quite unlikely, quite unpromising. And I'm actually going to read you a little bit of the translation from the manuscript. This translation was done by Professor Patrick K. Ford, one of my great heroes. And I just love the way he gives us a picture of this 14-year-old boy called Amairgen. He reached the age of 14 years without speaking. His belly grew till it was as huge as a big house, sinewy and fat. The snot ran from his nose into his mouth. His skin was black, his teeth white, his face pallid. His legs and thighs were the size of the handles of a smith's bellows. His feet were cloven under huge, gnarly ankles. He had high cheekbones and a very long face. His eyes were dark red and sunken under long, hairy eyebrows. The hair on his head was rough and spiky, and his back was humped, bony, and scabby. And so he was not handsome. And if he were left sitting for a long time without cleaning up after him, okay, just be careful here. Trigger alert. This part is really yucky. His excrement would pile up as far as his hips. His favorite foods were boiled curds, salt made from burnt seaweed, unripe blackberries, bright rowan berries, burnt ears of corn, stems of wild garlic, hollow nuts, all upon a table for his delectation. Well, and so he was not handsome. Well, at the same time, the chief poet of Ireland was called Athairne, whose name actually might have to do with being fatherly, or it might have to do with satire. But indeed, Athairne was a champion at satire, and he was a great one for believing that kings and leaders must give a poet anything he asks, or face dire consequences. In fact, Athairne was especially famous because one time he demanded the eye of a one-eyed king, the only functioning good eye that the king had left, and he got it. Well, on this day, he sent his servant Greth to the forge, the blacksmith's forge of Ecet Salach, to do an errand. And while Greth was there, he happened to look into a room and spy this very unpromising youth who was sitting eating as he always did. And when Amairgen, the young man, saw Greth, the servant, he said to him, "Inith Greth Gruth." And again, "Inith Greth Gruth." And a third time, "Inith Greth Gruth," which means, "Does Greth eat curds?" Well, instantly, Greth turned white as a sheet and ran from the forge and ran all the way back to Athairne. And Athairne said, "Have you come from a battle, or why do you look the way you do?" And Greth said, "I have just met the person who will replace you as the chief poet of Ireland and put you out of your job unless something is done." Meanwhile, back at the forge, Ecet Salach came in and saw Amairgen's sister, who was looking concerned. And he said, "Who was that here?" And she told him about Greth, and she told him what her brother had said in Greth Gruth. And Ecet Salach, very canny, said, "You know what will happen because of that? They'll try to kill the lad. We'll have to think of something." And so he sent Amairgen away with his sister. They actually went up to a shack in the hills, a bothy. And in the meantime, he made an effigy out of clay of Amairgen and put it and clothed it in Amairgen's clothes and put it in his bed. Well, that night, what happened? But Athairne and Greth snuck into their house with a bright, shiny axe, sharp, and without any pity, they came to the figure in the bed, and Athairne swung and brought down the axe, and to his eyes believed that he had chopped off the head of this young upstart poet who would threaten his office. And just then the dog started barking, and the whole household was alerted, and everybody knew what had happened, even though they ran away. Well, it was about a month later when the whole matter was brought before the court, and a judgment was issued. And the judgment went against Athairne, and it was demanded upon him, or demanded of him, that he pay a log enech, which means an honor price, or literally it's like the face price, for what he had tried to do of the chief poet's status. So even though he hadn't killed him, he still had to pay up as though he had killed a chief poet, and the price of that was expensive. That's 21 cows. And what's more, he was required to take on Amairgen as an apprentice. And so he did. And he taught Amairgen everything he knew. And a long while after that, when Athairne grew ill and eventually left this world, Amairgen became the chief poet of Ireland. Now, what a story is that? I told you it was disgusting, I told you it was violent, and I also said it was redeeming, and I think it is. Now, for us, what can we make of this story? I think, again, we can think historically, first off, to think that there was contention among poets, absolutely. But I'd like to actually think in a metaphorical way instead, because I think we'll get more mileage out of the story for ourselves if we do. In this story, we have two kinds of poets. We have Athairne, who's official, who is decorated, who is recognized, who is institutional, has an institutional affiliation. He is sort of like, almost like the mayor of poetry, or the high lord of poetry. And then we have this wild, instinctive, ungainly, ugly even, this protean, I guess, figure, Amairgen, this figure. And to me, I see such a, the tale begins with such a contrast between these two. And that official figure wants to do away with that instinctive, wild kind of poetry. So think here, you can think about poetry, but you can also think about just artistry or creativity in general. And let's actually look at these characters as aspects of ourselves. I think that is the most fruitful way to do this. So there's a part of us that is outward looking, that is status oriented, that is trying to make and save face in our artistry, that is towing the line. And some would even say that's kind of an ego self or whatever. And then there's a part of us that is wild and ungainly and instinctive and still forming. And that outward facing status part of us wants to do away. It's embarrassed by, it's threatened by that other part. And that's what I see here. This this contention. Now, we have a mediator, and I find this really interesting. We have Ecet Salach, who is kind of between the two, the blacksmith. Now, blacksmiths were, for a long time, really up until the 19th century, even maybe the very beginning of the 20th century, considered to have magical powers and abilities. And I mean, if you think about it, the smith, you know, who is himself Salach, he is dirty, but he's also recognized. He's actually a very high status individual, has a high honor price himself. So he's sort of this interesting go-between between these two parts. He is the one who is canny and able to see what is happening as it happens. And he is the one, right, he's the one to keep fires going. I think that's really interesting that the blacksmith here, the poetry is associated with fire, with inspiration. And here is the blacksmith who keeps fires going, who transforms things in the heat of the fire. And he's the one to instantly understand the threat to this young poet, this 14-year-old poet whose first words are poetic utterance. He knows right away they will try to kill him. They will recognize poetic genius, albeit in its very, very early forms, but they will recognize what he could become. So I think it's interesting to think about that part of ourself that is sort of a mediator between those two parts, that can see what is happening and makes a plan to protect. So that, and now I also think it's important for us to make peace with the part of ourself that is ungainly, that is full of dormant gifts and energies, that is awkward, profoundly awkward, and which we, again, the outward facing, the status part of us, the artist that it looks good on the outside, might want to do away with. And yet I feel like in this tale, we're being invited to actually have affection for that part of ourselves and protection. Ultimately, at the end of this story, we actually have the two parts working together. We have that status-oriented part in service to the wild poetry of the awkward, ungainly becoming part of us, right? They are working together, and that is, I think, wholeness. That's where we're going. That's empowerment. So I hope that story is encouraging for you. So I want to ask you this question. What kind of protection and encouragement do you need from yourself? So that could be, how can you act as Ecet Salach, the blacksmith, to see what's going on and create shelter for that part of you? Or how can that outward facing, status-oriented part of you give protection and fosterage to that part that is becoming something new? Interesting, isn't it? It's a great story. I can't wait to hear your comments. Tell us in the comments how you see that, how you see this tale, what you're looking for, what you're going to give yourself. And that could be really very practical things like, I am going to give myself more time. Or it could be, I'm going to allow myself to create this thing that is, I'm not even sure how it's going to turn out. But I'm going to let that Amairgen part of me take the lead. And just in case you happen to watch last week's video about magic words, this poet, Amairgen, is the same poet, Amairgen, who said the magic words. So thank you, as ever. Thank you. I'm loving this conversation with you. I'm having a great time. Thanks for all of you who have subscribed. Thanks for all the likes. Thanks for the comments. And just the sense that we are a creative community together. I love it. I hope you have a wonderful, creative, and well-protected week. Take care, my friends. Bye for now.